The world is getting crazier. People are acting more and more insane. The end of the world is tomorrow. Tomorrow. There's only one thing to do when the world is falling apart. Listen to Basil and Gonz as they discuss this week's news and events through the lens of Bible prophecy. You are listening to Canary Crime News Talk.
You're listening to Canary Cry News Talk. It is July 2nd, 2025, episode number 855, World UFO Day. Hooray, we made it. My name is Gonz. Basil is out today. Apologize for the unorthodox intro to the show today. Running it solo. Basil was here by himself on Monday, and he did a very great breakdown on the Voice of America. Well, let me do the normal standard intro here. My name is Gonz, director of the Age of Deceit Films, your favorite agent provocateur for Christ, live to tape from the metaverse to bring you the best news, which is the gospel message of Jesus Christ, while reporting the egregious with a well-rounded, biblically grounded take on world events. And Basil's not here because he's having issues with electricity, believe it or not. He does not have power, which is, I guess, one of the things that you deal with when you live off-grid. It's just one of those issues, you know. If there's strong wind, bad weather, you can lose power. So pray for Basil. I think he's doing okay. I did try to reach him before I went live here, but he's not responding at the moment. So hopefully everything is okay. We are live right now on Rumble, on X. Shout out to X people out there. But we're also live on the Canary Cry News Talk YouTube channel and the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. I'm very curious to see how this goes. We are experimenting a little bit. The last time Canary Cry News Talk aired on the Face Like the Sun channel was right before the Face Like the Sun channel got suspended. And it was 4 long years before we got unsuspended. But here we are. We'll see if anybody tunes in from the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. Give it a... Oh, you know what? I need to turn on the comments because I believe all the comments aggregate down at the bottom right there if you're watching on the screen. I do believe it doesn't matter what platform you're on, your comment will, or I guess your chat, will be displayed on the screen. But without further ado, let's just jump into it. There's a few things that I want to cover today. It is World UFO Day.
You don't know what you're looking at.
What's driving that thing? It's not a space alien.
Aliens. It's unidentified.
If anybody has the Canary Cry calendar, today is World UFO Day. It's also the anniversary of America's first television broadcast, which, of course, propaganda on television, news, media itself has come a long way. And 1928, it's been 97 years, almost 100 years of pure media propaganda at the screen level with televisions, and now, of course, with our devices and computers and everything else. So World UFO Day, it's an international observed day, I suppose. It is actually 2 days. It's June 24th and July 2nd. June 24th is the day that I believe it was Kenneth Arnold. Yes, Kenneth Arnold reported his UFO sighting, a very famous one. I believe it was up in Washington. And July 2nd is the date of the supposed UFO crash in 1947, the Roswell event. So the World UFO Day Organization declared July 2nd World UFO Day. So here we are. And I wanted to bring an article because, the UFO topic has evolved in the last few years with whistleblowers and, mainstream attention, so to speak. And not that there wasn't mainstream attention before, but it just became a much bigger, more politicized thing. And so I find it fascinating that a place like the New York Times was writing an opinion piece with the headline, "Did the Deep State Invent the UFO Craze?" Yes, New York Times opinion piece, folks. Headline, "Did the Deep State Invent the UFO Craze?" And I'll read through some of this. It's well written. The author here, I forget his name. Let me try to get the appropriate name here. Ross Douthat. Ross Douthat. He does a decent job of critically thinking about this UFO issue, but I do find it funny that just a couple years ago, I believe, it was the New York Times that came out and said, "Yeah, there's a deep state. There is a thing called the deep state, but we love the deep state." Do you guys remember that? We might even have like a jingle. I think Jonathan F. made a jingle about it where we were just joking about how much we love the deep state because the New York Times says they love the deep state and they just need to meet the people that are behind the deep state. And of course, New York Times at the time, they were misleading folks with who they determined as deep state, which they stretched the definition of, your unseen bureaucrats or less than public people in government and things of that nature. And they interviewed these people that they're not necessarily deep state, but they're just your average Joe working for the government or whatever. And the New York Times came out and said, "We love the deep state." But now it's just presupposed knowledge that the deep state exists. And in fact, they're so nefarious that perhaps they created the entire UFO craze. I'll read a little bit of this. I have to do it in the text-only format because there's a paywall, and that's one way to get around it. Maybe I shouldn't say that out loud. It says here, "The last few times I wrote about the unidentifying flying objects in the spring and fall of 2023, there had been a series of curious happenings, reveals, and leaks and would-be whistleblowing that convicted me of some group of people inside our government wanted Americans to believe that the national security state had secret knowledge about UFOs. This was a deliberately circumspect take on an extremely weird situation, which had three notable features." He does a good job outlining these features, so to speak, these observations. First, the kinds of people coming forward with claims and the footage and accounts of mysterious flying objects being publicized in this newspaper, meaning New York Times, among other places, were more serious seeming, more difficult to eye roll away than what we'd seen in prior eras of UFO enthusiasm. He doesn't mention here that some of the whistleblowing laws were changed right before guys like what was his name? Grunt? What was his? I'm trying to remember his name. The main UFO guy. I think he actually mentions his name here in the article. Oops. Here we go. Okay, so yes, these people that were coming out and starting to talk about this were much more credible, quote unquote, credible people. They were experts. They were people that were in government or, high-ranking military officials, things of that nature. And it continues here. Second, the sudden bipartisan interest from senators and congressmen, not just eccentrics in the House of Representatives, but also figures like Chuck Schumer, who, when then the majority leader, and Senator Mike Rounds, Republican of South Dakota, was real and substantial, suggesting that a bit more was visible behind the curtain than we knew. But third, at the same time, all the leaks and insider accounts fell consistently short of what UFO believers call expectantly, quote-unquote, disclosure, offering enough to feed speculation about secret government programs, but not nearly enough to overcome a basic skeptical default. It's interesting to point out the definition of disclosure as he is putting it here. Of course, disclosure is, in basic terms, in colloquial terms, in sort of the general public, it's Grush. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Grush. David Grush, I believe. The name I couldn't remember. The disclosure is basically the government admitting that UFOs exist. Okay, or they're hiding secret things and they're, disclosing that information. And, friends of ours, colleagues, such as L.A. Marzulli, have long said that we've been in disclosure, that we have had this trickle effect for a few years now, maybe even a couple decades, where the government is kind of disclosing certain pieces of information. Now, of course, there is, and the article goes on to talk about this, there is the problem of these influential or expert type of people coming out and telling their stories and telling their testimonies of what they saw and what they might have heard and whatnot, basically, in the government while they were serving, things of that nature. And I won't read the whole thing here, but basically the author is skeptical. He's starting to become skeptical of all of these claims, especially because there's a lot of talk, but there's not a lot of action when it comes to actual things being revealed by the government. He talks about, let's see. Yeah, he brings up David Grush here, Luis Elizondo, and how they have books to sell, at least Elizondo does. And so, it would be a good time for them to pop their head out and start talking about this issue again. It says here, 18 months later, as you may have noticed, no Lockheed Martin employees have brought forth detailed plans of the alien spacecraft hidden in their corporate vault, and no former head of the Department of Energy have confessed to keeping a great bureaucratic secret hidden since the dawn of the atomic age. Which is, again, it's kind of like, well, if it's secret, they're not going to just come out and tell all those secrets, right? Instead, we've had more interviews and first-person accounts, but no actual disclosure, even of the Jeffrey Epstein or JFK files variety from the Trump administration that includes a few UFO-curious figures in its ranks. And now, in a pair of articles last month by two Wall Street Journal reporters, we've been given one of the more comprehensive attempts at a non-ET explanation of where some of the weirdness originates, relying heavily on interviews with Sean Kirkpatrick, who ran the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, a Pentagon task force investigating the UFO evidence. The reporters reveal several possible mythology-forging projects inside the military-industrial complex. I forget that I'm reading the New York Times. This is something I've noticed. We've noticed this, I guess, over the last couple of years, and this is not unheard of. That the New York Times, they were very left-leaning, progressive. They're still pretty much garbage, of course, but we've noticed that they had to sort of turn and go back to a little bit more integral reporting, or at least in the opinion pieces, have a little bit more integrity than the outright. Not protests per se, but what's the word I'm looking for? I'm blanking on the word. It's not a difficult word either. What do the people do? The activism. That's it. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah. A lot of new journalism is activism nowadays. And so we've noticed that there was a pullback from the heavy activism recently. So anyway, it's just wild to me that we're reading an article from the New York Times skeptical of the entire UFO disclosure thing happening, in the public, and even suggesting that the military industrial complex is behind the mythology forging of this whole UFO phenomenon. Very interesting. A combination of deliberate psychological operations aimed at covering up top secret technologies, possible bureaucratic pranks, and hazing rituals that accidentally made mid-level personnel into UFO believers, and top-secret experiments that the government allowed its own personnel to interpret as possible close encounters. So here we go. The Journal reporters also follow Kirkpatrick through investigations that did not pan out. A purported piece of extraterrestrial material turned out to have prosaic origins. A claim about Russia reverse engineering alien technology probably originated in the Russian version of our own UFO disinformation. And a larger pattern emerged where, quote, evidence to support the whistleblower's theories appeared to vanish just as Kirkpatrick got close to it, end quote. So again, he's highlighting this problem where we had this surge of UFO interest in the bureaucratic spectrum in government, in the U.S. government specifically. which is not unheard of. There's always spurts of it, throughout time. Of course, every president gets asked about the UFO question. You have the 1980s with the Star Wars project and Reagan. There's rumors about Reagan was shown one of these aircrafts, and so there's all kinds of history when it comes to presidents, governments, and the conversation therein with the UFOs. But what let me read a little bit more here. What's useful about the journal stories is that there are more capacious than some prior debunking explanations. For instance, certain skeptics pinned the recent wave of UFO-related governmental signaling on true believers who were inserted into the national security loop by Senator Harry Reid of Nevada, and who then traded on those credentials to legitimate their theories. But as far as I can tell, this explanation didn't do justice to the apparent scale of UFO beliefs within the government. This portrait of quote-unquote deep state deception and delusion hardly resolves the UFO question. It doesn't explain the weird aerial encounters and the weird aerial encounters that helped touch off the current age of interest. So, well, let me finish, actually. Encounters which are, as far as I can tell from public and private information, still taken quite seriously as an unresolved problem by defense and intelligence officials. Nor does it tell us how to understand the phenomenon of personal paranormal encounters, the UFO as a religious experience zone where aliens seem to be playing angelic or demonic or fairy adjacent parts. So pretty a pretty good observation here to parse out this idea that, okay, the government's out here, they're talking about UFOs. You got these whistleblowers coming out after the whistleblower thing was changed. But the evidence they presented, it was like an endless rabbit trail. They just put all this stuff out there. You got all the UFO community looking into these topics, which are mostly dead ends. And so, what now? Well, he makes the observation, which is a good observation, that it doesn't actually tell us anything about the real phenomenon of real encounters people have, whether it's seeing something in the sky or a true experience encountering some entity, which, of course, from the biblical perspective, we've been sitting on that mountaintop for a long time saying like, hey, this is a whole spiritual battle. There's a whole narrative that comes from Genesis 6 that would really help explain a lot of this in proper biblical context as to what is actually going on here and what may have been going on for centuries, millennia, and perhaps, is the big cosmic war happening in the unseen realms and the seen realms. And so, I've been working on my master's certificate of divinity, and I wrote my first paper on this author who did a treatise on how to read the Gospels wisely, and the assignment had to do with having a critique of this author. His name is Pennington, and he does a great job of sort of compiling the arguments of how to treat the Gospels, the four Gospels, and the genre that they're in, and what kinds of historical debates have taken place over the last couple centuries, really, after the Enlightenment, the debate between historicism, what we know is true, the problem with epistemology in terms of how do we know what we know at all. And what was fascinating was he landed on this concept of testimony and narrative being vitally important in seeking out truth, because the historicists of the Enlightenment that came out of the Enlightenment period, because prior to the Enlightenment, much of scientific inquiry was based on this idea that there's a God, that, the Bible's true, but at the very least, God exists. He created the world with a particular order, and we are merely beginning to discover the different elements of that created order. And so there was a top-down sort of, at the very least, theological approach to all of science, because it just makes sense, right? Like, hey, we didn't create any of this stuff in terms of the materials and time itself and space and all this. We're just born into it. It existed prior to us. there must be a God, and there must be a reason why we can understand these things. Well, ever since the Enlightenment, of course, they got rid of that whole concept. They got into rationalism, materialism, reductionism, and they said, hey, forget God. God doesn't explain anything. Here's what's really going on with the clouds, right? And they look at the processes and the material mechanics of what's happening, and that's what sparked the Enlightenment. And in the halls of academia, in the halls of Christian academia too, there was a long-stand debate, right? Oh, like, how do we understand? How do we know if Jesus was even a real person? How do we know any history, right? And there was this huge debate for a few decades. Well, it got to the point where, and I've been talking about this for about 10 years, ever since I started the Face Like the Sun channel. I've been talking about how atheism and materialism, all that's dead in terms of the halls of academia, or people that are thinking deeply and critically about these issues, especially in academia or scholarship. The idea of materialism and atheism is really losing a lot of momentum, a lot of weight in those realms, because a lot of theologians and philosophers have come out and destroyed their arguments, really. But really, the big thing was historicists realized that all of written history, every single piece of written history, serves or is, especially before the last couple centuries when we had the printing press and computers obviously changed things. But all of history before then, written, is a curated, filtered account of an event that happened or a person that might have existed. It's all filtered through an individual writing these things down, and this individual or group of people are deciding what's important, what's not important. What does this mean? What did this event mean for the community or for the people that were involved? So every piece of known history in that way is shaped by an individual interpreting what happened and putting it down on paper. Now, material scientists might say, well, we don't know for sure. Like, we can do carbon dating on certain items, and it doesn't match up with the date that they said that. Blah, blah, blah. So they got their ways of trying to get around that conversation. But in reality, if you're really honest about history, and I think this is what historians struggle with in a sense, when it comes to the epistemology, we only know what is passed down based on what people wrote, and we only know what they wrote about because they wrote it. They actually filtered ideas into the writing, and help contextualize those events, those people, as they pass down this information. So when you think about the Gospels, I'll get back to the UFO thing. It all ties in. The Gospels, the four Gospels, they are testimonials, right? They are testimonies written from. They had the word. Whatever, spoken word as a way to communicate these things before. But then once it was put down on paper, it carried with it the perspectives and personalities of Luke, of John, of Mark, and Matthew, their personalities and what they felt was important from the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, what they felt was needed to be written down. And the idea that there are contradictions between the Gospels, because people always talk about that, right? Oh, there's contradictions in the Bible. Even within the four Gospels, there's contradictions. There are, timing things that are different. There are people that may have done different things. God, Jesus does things in different order according to what gospel you're reading. Well, those details and those conflicts is actually what makes the four Gospels so powerful and long-lasting, because the greater narrative that's being presented is what's important. It's a transformative narrative, right? It's supposed to not just inform you about who Jesus is, and what he did and all this kind of stuff, but it's meant to transform our lives, your life, in very eternal sense, a very spiritual sense. So it's beyond any genre that we can kind of lump things into. And I found it so fascinating that this Pennington guy talked about narrative and the importance of it and how it has withstood the test of time because of these complexities within the gospel, and especially in light of fifth generation warfare, which we are in right now, which is the warfare of the cognitive space, the mind share, Some people might call it info war, where the people's minds is the battlefield where ideas and influences come in to try to sway people to vote a certain way or act a certain way, behave a certain way, whatever it might be. Now, there was one criticism that I wrote in my paper, which I got a perfect score on. All right. And by the way, I may not continue this program because we ran into a problem. I'm not going to talk about the problem right now, but it's a problem. It's a problem. I guess I should have expected any institution, Christian institution, to have these issues. But anyway, that's for another time. My critique was the lack of Pennington's discussion of mythology. And the reason was because I went on a rant. Of course, you guys watching this, you likely know where I stand on this stuff. We've ranted about it for over a decade now. But because of St. Augustine's theology on Genesis 6, his interpretation on Genesis 6, that changed 1,500 years of Christian theological treaty on things like demonology, things like the Old Testament narrative of angels and even genocide. And there's a whole lot there. And especially, and you'll see it on a Beyond the Verse video this week, and I tried to compile it into like a 10-minute thing. Jesus's ministry itself, and I know you know this, especially if you're familiar with Dr. Heiser, Michael Heiser, the late Dr. Michael Heiser's work with reversing Hermon. Jesus's ministry, almost every single thing he did was in direct opposition to what happened in Genesis 6 with the Watchers. I mean, even the parables and the teachings and the Sermon on the Mount, all those things are counter to what the Watchers did with humanity. It's a very, when you line it up, it's like, it's very hard to deny. So to not have that Genesis 6 angelic interpretation of Genesis 6, because what Augustine did was he said, hey, forget angels. This is all just wispy stuff. We can't verify this stuff. He had a Neoplatonistic background. So he said, okay, it's all allegorical, folks. All this angel, Nephilim, it's all allegorical. Demons, yeah, allegorical. And with that, and Augustine is very influential in Western Christianity, but with that one thing, he threw the baby out with the bathwater. There is such a lack of ability to understand what's going on in the entire biblical narrative, even and especially Jesus's ministry, that it's alarming to me. It's like, why do we not have, why aren't we just diving in full into the concept of mythology and fixing it all in terms of this modern era? So anyway, I think this is why a lot of people are starting to wake up to the Genesis 6 paradigm, as we might call it, because it's much more popular now. Everybody knows about the Nephilim now, or at least a lot more people do now than they did back in 2011 when we started the YouTube channel here. So I bring it up because it ties into this UFO topic, this UFO thing. And especially when this author in the New York Times says, oh, the military-industrial complex, they're creating this mythology of UFOs. To me, it's like, well, yes, every narrative that's created, and especially in modern times, it's got to be mythology, or it's got to be mythologized. These narratives have to be mythologized in order for it to work. And you think about even just the founding of the United States. When I was in elementary school, I got the treatment of, hey, George Washington was a great man, was a great guy, and he went against the royal crown, and he found something better. He did something better. He did something great, and all these founding fathers were just wonderful people. They did nothing wrong. They were great folks, and you gotta give them their praise because they founded this country, and that is mythology. I mean, it is. It's absolute mythology. Some of these guys were Freemasons. Some of them were deists. Some much worse, right? So these were not just good people doing the great thing. And, they're remembered for the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, whatever, these things that are important to us today. But it doesn't mean that they were just these holier-than-thou folks. And that perception comes from mythologizing those individuals. And, of course, with anything, you begin to see how the formation of narrative is constructed and how it influences people's thinking. And I find it powerful that the Gospels are 4 testimonial accounts that carry a core narrative. All 4 Gospels focus a lot more time on the last week of Jesus's life and the death on the cross, obviously, and the resurrection. That's really the main point. That's the transformative moment in history. So, and it comes down to faith, right? Because those testimonies exist, those truths exist in writing. It has shaped Western civilization for 2,000 years. But I will say, after about 500 years with Augustine, his treaty of Genesis 6 completely changed the trajectory. It took out so much meat from the Gospels that I don't think and of course, maybe God allowed this to happen because he needed certain things to happen. And God's sovereign. He's going to do it his way, and it might not make sense to us. But I do believe that there is a revived interest in this topic, especially now because the world is becoming more re-enchanted, as Carl Teichert talks about, our friend Carl Teichert, who wrote the book, The Game of Gods, talking about the re-enchantment of society. People are really into the occult, into esoteric things. And that was another part of what I mentioned in the paper was, hey, in the aftermath of the Enlightenment, if we had these things in place with Genesis 6, we would have a lot more tools in our toolbox as a church to combat what the Enlightenment tried to bring forth. And also, in the halls of academia and, the ivory tower of scholarly bantering, basically, writing papers and all, debates and all that, they don't acknowledge things like demonology or supernatural or paranormal. They're starting to, because there's obviously a interest in that stuff worldwide. So academics is they're starting to kind of discuss these things. But at the onset of the Enlightenment in the preceding decades, the halls of academia, we're talking about these issues at the surface level. But beneath the surface, once they took the Bible out as the foundation of scientific inquiry, they turned to the occult. They brought in mysticism. They brought in, and they were doing this under the surface. So you couldn't see this, at the university level per se, at least up front, right? But we know, like you look at Yale University, Skull and Bones, HQ, right? I think I showed that clip from I think it was like an ABC report. It's on Age of Deceit. I clipped it for the reason of, hey, in the year 2000, this is before 2001, there was a report saying like, strange individuals getting hazed at Yale University in the Skull and Bones headquarters or something. There's some video footage that was taken. And so it was always there. And because they stripped God out, the biblical God, now there was a vacuum for spirituality, and in came mysticism, in came Eastern philosophies, in came the occult, the esoteric. And that's why we see at the end of the 18th century, or the 1800s, I'm sorry, at the end of the 1800s, we see Helena Blavatsky push theosophy and explode. It exploded all over the place, but it was not acknowledged or sort of integrated into the surface of academia. And I think it allowed for a lot of that stuff to develop over time. And now, a couple hundred years later, the whole atheistic, materialistic, enlightenment type of front has crumbled, at least in the old sense, although I would argue the Enlightenment is being rebranded into a more quote-unquote Christian version of it, which we've been talking about on Canary Cry News Talk for a while, identifying the problems with Christian nationalism and all these things that are being attacked publicly, and how it's a complicated game, folks. Like fifth generation warfare, the more I am digging into this stuff, it pins different people and ideas in different places, and it tries to drive the masses into this frenzy of arguments and divide and conquer the whole thing. And so, it's almost like I need that. I need the red yarn and that guy. Like, you guys see this, the connections. So, so bringing it back to the UFO topic here, the vacuum that was created with the Enlightenment caused the occultism to grow, and part of that, of course, is this idea of secrecy, secret societies doing things, and that trickled all the way into as governments became modernized, especially after World War I, even more after World War II, with the globalization and all the institutions like the UN and all these things being developed post World War II. It was ripe to create a public psychological operation with UFOs, because if you remember, what is it, 1947 was the year Roswell happened. That's when American culture picked up on the idea of UFOs and aliens and flying saucers and all that kind of stuff. Again, separate the phenomenon itself from the propaganda, and you'll start to see that, the government's been behind the propaganda side for a long time. At least 100 years, maybe more. And I think it was the late Dr. Michael Heiser, his opinion of Roswell was that it was actually some human experiments gone wrong. And some people found some of the collateral damage from these experiments, and they needed a cover story. So they said UFOs. And that sparked an entire industry. And so you look at it from that perspective, and I think this author in the New York Times, folks, is on the right track. I never thought I would say those words, but he is on that right track in terms of seeing the circus of disclosure in the Senate and these hearings and all this stuff, seeing it for what it is as a potential misinformation distraction thing. But then, of course, what is it concealing? Why are they doing that? Why are they letting everybody run around in circles trying to figure out what's going on with this thing? But then why is there still the real phenomenon of actual people seeing things and, the weird stuff that they encounter? So let me finish this article here just to kind of wrap things up with this. But parsimony is important. It could be that sometimes the military-industrial complex uses UFOs as cover stories for secret projects, and sometimes uses secret projects as cover stories for actual encounters with non-human intelligence. It could be that the journal's military source intend to pile disinformation atop disinformation. But when you combine the evidence that UFO stories frequently have been used as disinformation with the failure of would-be whistleblowers to make good on their promise of proof, it's understandable if you assume that any given insider story of secret UFO knowledge probably originates in cover-ups and PsyOps. Well done, guy. He's kind of figuring things out. I'm very impressed. As opposed to the X-Files possibility that all elements of the UFO question are intimately connected, that some group in the government knows what the strange aerial encounters represent and how they fit together with abduction narratives, and by the way, also has an alien spacecraft in a hidden hangar somewhere. But defaulting to the PsyOp explanation doesn't just leave a set of weird UFO-related phenomena unexplained, it also leaves an obvious question open and unanswered. If many stories of insider UFO knowledge originate in deliberate disinformation projects, and we have been living through a veritable golden age of strange leaks and tales of insider knowledge, then what exactly might this era of particular PsyOp be intended to conceal? Again, I'm kind of blown away that I'm reading the New York Times opinion piece here, but here we are. Now, I am going to flip this particular take on its head because it is New York Times. You're not off the hook, guy, because you wrote some logical things about the UFO phenomenon. My question is, why is the New York Times itself thinking critically, thinking rationally about this phenomenon, the UFO craze thing? It's a good question. Why? Is it just the fact that they're losing viewers and readers, so they have to go a little bit more center in the political spectrum so that they can, maintain an audience? maybe. Or something else. I don't know. What do you guys think? You guys can leave it in the comments or put it in the chat or something if you have any ideas. I saw some people talking about holograms and different technologies that exist. Absolutely. We know the government, at the very least, or you can call it the deep state, although even that phrase has lost a little bit of its impact, I suppose, because it's become such a popular phrase to mean people, bureaucratic individuals who are behind the scenes, that are not public. Maybe I say maybe. I would say they likely do have technologies that are well beyond what we possess publicly and even within the military. And there's likely a group that has access to these technologies that are way, way, way ahead. And if they are, as the gap between the public technology and the private technology widens, the temptation to take advantage of that will also grow. And so I would imagine that as that gap expands, those individuals won't be able to help themselves. It really is the Matthew 4, Jesus in the desert being tempted by the devil, basically the devil saying, hey, here's all the kingdoms of the world. All you got to do is worship. All you got to do is worship me and I'll give it to you. And if you apply that to contemporary things, then you would imagine that maybe these individuals also were given a opportunity to become rulers of Earth. And, I don't think it's worth your soul to do that, but some people may decide otherwise. So there you go. That is the New York Times. Did the deep state invent the UFO craze? And I'm just curious what you all think about that, because it's a very poignant article. It's a good article that really is approaching this topic with a rational set of eyes, and but that makes me wonder, like, why are you starting to make sense, New York Times? So there you go. That's that. All right. I want to jump into something here that, once again, it's 5th gen warfare. It's a lot of different things, but it's very complicated in a sense. I'll paint you the picture.
5th gen warfare.
They're targeting you. They're targeting you.
5th gen warfare.
It's also got to do with the Middle East and Israel situation.
Zionist.
And I'm going to take this, and this is probably not a good thing for the algos. I'm taking this article from Al Jazeera, and the headline here is UN report lists companies complicit in Israel's, quote, genocide. Who are they? Okie dokie. Now, we know that this topic has been just, it has exploded on the scene in recent years, or not even recent, maybe in the last year or so, it's really picked up steam. And it's because of the war, the war with Palestine, or at least Israel declaring war against Gaza and Palestinians and all that, which is an ongoing issue. But again, just like how the New York Times is writing up opinion pieces that mention the deep state and the military-industrial complex and psychological operations as a potential explanation for the entire UFO phenomenon, we have the UN, the United Nations, coming out with a report that lists all the companies that are helping out modern nation-state Israel in their conflicts over there. I'll read a little bit here. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the occupied Palestinian territory, OPT, has released a new report mapping the corporations aiding Israel in the displacement of Palestinians and its genocidal war on Gaza in breach of international law. Now, you got to stick with me here. If you're here, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Stick with me because I'm going to walk us through some of the list here and the companies and corporations that are assisting Israel in the war against Israel's enemies. And I'm also going to, at the same time, there's another article. Let me just show you the headline of the article now, just because I think I want you guys to be ready for it, okay? CNN had the headline, "Prophecy, Not Politics, may also shape America's clash with Iran." And of course, they're not fond of Christians, end times Christians specifically, but it's a little bit more complicated because, of course, they're not talking about necessarily Christians that are thinking critically about end times prophecy either. So it's a very complicated mess. Now, let me go back to the Al Jazeera article here.
Kabbalah.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Yeah, it's Kabbalah, sure.
Kabbalah.
Kabbalah is a belief system that predates religion.
Kabbalah.
It's incredibly scientific.
Oh, yeah. Very scientific. Extremely scientific. It says here, Francesca Albanese, her latest reports, which is scheduled to be presented at a news conference in Geneva on Thursday, names 48 corporate actors, including United States tech giants Microsoft, Alphabet Inc., which is Google's parent company, and Amazon. A database of more than 1,000 corporate entities was also put together as part of the investigation. 1,000 corporate entities that are assisting in the Israel conflict there, which echoes a lot of the corporations that assisted Hitler back in World War II. Your IBMs and your General Motors, and they were just, we didn't know we were going to be used for some kind of genocide. And I got the actual paper. It's a revised version. I guess they're not publishing this for another couple days or something. So it may not be the final document, but I have it in the show notes for anybody interested in digging into some of that. You can go to canarycrynewstalk.com and click on episode 855 and go down, and you'll see my list of sources for this episode. And but let me go back to the Al Jazeera, because they actually outline a lot of this for us here. Quote, Israel's forever occupation. Remember, this is Al Jazeera, so they're anti-Israel already, right? They're like pro-Palestine, anti-Israel. And I'm not saying I am pro-Palestine or anti-Israel in the political discussion here, because I know people get caught up in that. I'm trying to stay out of that conversation and look at it from a 1,000-foot view and identifying the different working elements of this story. You probably know where I land with some of those topics personally. But for the sake of this particular analysis here, I'm not saying, that everything that's being said here by Al Jazeera is all in the up and up or anything like that. But this is just what they report here. Israel's forever occupation has become the ideal testing ground for arms manufacturers and big tech, providing significant supply and demand, little oversight, and zero accountability, while investors in private and public institutions profit freely. Private and public, public and private. Public-private partnerships. It's been the crux of... they should just make it illegal. I really think so much of our world issues would go away if they just made public-private partnerships illegal. I mean, it's really that simple, folks. I can't really think of another thing that would really change the landscape, or at least, for a little while, create some kind of cleanup job or something. And maybe it's in the cards. Maybe it's in the cards for the future. If you have any weight in what Manly P. Hall, the occultist Freemason, said at the end of his life in the 1990s, he said in the 21st century, the Prince of Peace will come. He's going to clean up everything, clean up all the corruption. And so, yes, very interesting. It says here, the companies are no longer merely implicated in occupation. They may be embedded in an economy of genocide, it said, in a reference to Israel's ongoing assault on the Gaza Strip. In an expert opinion last year, Albanese said there were, quote, reasonable grounds to believe Israel was committing genocide in the besieged Palestinian enclave. Okay, so yes, there's the geopolitical issue there. The tech sector, this is later in the article, meanwhile, has enabled the collection, storage, and governmental use of biometric data on Palestinians, quote, supporting Israel's discriminatory permit regime, the report said. Microsoft, Alphabet, and Amazon grant Israel, quote, virtually government-wide access to their cloud and AI technologies, enhancing its data processing and surveillance capabilities. Okay, now, they're giving a little bit more away than I think they even realized, because it says that Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon are granting Israel virtually government-wide access to their cloud and AI technologies, meaning stuff we use too, stuff businesses every single day uses. Great. Fantastic. The U.S. company IBM has also been responsible for training military and intelligence personnel, as well as managing the central database for Israel's Population, Immigration, and Borders Authority that stores the biometric data for Palestinians, the report said. And all of this will start to make sense. In the last couple of weeks, we reported on the four, I think Basil called them the four brides of the beast, where you had a couple people from OpenAI and Meta, and of course Palantir, these CTOs, these chief technology officers from these companies, become military leaders. You know, they were brought onto the army officially, without any kind of process that normal citizens would go through. They got special treatment. It says here, found U.S. software platform Palantir. Ooh, where's my Palantir jingle? I got it here. Hold on, I got it. There it is.
Special thanks to our sponsor, Palantir.
Artificial intelligence. Surveillance state.
Yay, Palantir. It found U.S. software platform Palantir Technologies expanded its support to the Israeli military since the start of the war on Gaza in 2023. Yes, I think we knew about this. And they talk about the AI that they use, Lavender Gospel. We've talked about Gospel, the AI system that predicts crime or whatever. And Where's Daddy? Yeah, fantastic. I shared these screenshots on my X account, and I don't think X liked it because I did not, for whatever reason, maybe I do know the reason. The post did not do well. Let me see how it's doing so far. Yeah, 257 impressions on this with basically no comments. Like, I'm the only person that commented on it. I commented on my own post. Yeah, and so the image here basically shows all the different companies that are currently supporting Israel in their infrastructure in the war against Palestine and Iran and all these things. So with military, they have Lockheed Martin, they have Leonard, what is this? Leonard and Fanuc. And then you have in the technology sector, IBM, Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, Palantir, Settlement Expansion. I thought this was interesting. You have CAT, you have Booking.com, you have RADA, and Airbnb. Airbnb is assisting Israel in settlement expansion. But also, this is where it gets very interesting. South Korea and Sweden, Volvo specifically, also contributing to Israel in this regard. Electricity in the U.S., it's Chevron and what's this other one? Hard to see this other one here. Glencore, that's what it is. Or no, Drummond. Yeah, Drummond Energy. And then Switzerland, Glencore, and UK BP also contributing to the electricity stuff. And here's where it gets very, very fascinating. Agriculture, China and Mexico. And then, of course, with finance, you have France with BNP Paribas and UK Barclays. These are major financial institutions. So, the China getting involved in this is interesting. It's like China is teaming up with a bunch of U.S. corporations and, Western corporations from places like South Korea and Sweden and the UK and France to assist Israel. Okay. All right. Whatever. Sure. Yeah. All right. Let me go back to this article from Al Jazeera. These include Caterpillar, Leonardo-owned Rada Electronic Industries, South Korea's HD Hyundai, and Sweden's Volvo Group, which provide heavy machinery for home demolition and the development of illegal settlements in the West Bank. So you got Swedish and South Korean companies going in there, demoing certain places in Gaza, and creating settlements for those people. Wild, man, wild. In the agriculture sector, Chinese Bright Dairy and Food is a majority owner of Tnuva, Israel's largest food conglomerate, which benefits from land seized from Palestinians in Israel's illegal outposts. Yeah, there you go. It benefits them. Bottom line is always the most important thing. Netafim, a company providing drip irrigation technology that is 80% owned by Mexico's Oriba Advanced Corporation, provides infrastructure to exploit water resources in the occupied West Bank. It's a team effort, folks. It's a multinational team effort here to take out those pesky Palestinians that don't deserve their land there. Then, of course, we go a little bit higher up in the ranks here. Who are the main investors behind these companies? No surprise. The report identified U.S. multinational investment companies BlackRock and Vanguard as the main investors behind several listed companies, and they go through the percentage of shares each of these organizations own, and it's quite a bit, folks. It's quite a bit. You got, well, I'm not going to go through all the details here, but you can look at it yourself. You can see how BlackRock and Vanguard play a role in all of this. So it says here, are private companies liable under international law? According to Albanese's report, yes. Corporate entities are under an obligation to avoid violating human rights through direct action or in their business partnerships. States have the primary responsibility to ensure that corporate entities respect human rights and must prevent, investigate, and punish abuses by private actors. Good luck with that. I love the idealism here of Albanese saying, like, yes, corporations are liable under international law. And yes, even though corporations fall under the umbrella of a nation, that nation should make sure that those companies are, going by the book or whatever. And it's like, yeah, good luck. No way. They're getting bought out. It's all upside down. Let's see. I don't think we need to read anything else on this here. But you get the idea here that, of course, Al Jazeera, so, take that with a grain of salt. And the UN, take that with a grain of salt. When was the last time the UN made a report like this where it really calls out a lot of the corporatocracy going on, the techno corporations that are behind certain things? Very interesting. So you have this line of thought, and that's one that we have a lot of people are catching on to, right? That the problem here is with groups like BlackRock and some of these bigger organizations and institutions taking over, buying up land, buying up property, buying up shares of big companies. And so they have this unbalanced influence, not just over these companies, but because they have so much influence over those companies, they then therefore have a lot of influence over government and policy because, all of the lobbying that happens in between. So you starting to see this line of attack of, okay, here's the real culprits behind the whole problem here with Gaza and the genocide that's taking place. Now, on the other side of it, I'm going to go back to the CNN article here because I think you'll start to see the tenets of this fifth generation warfare. So this is CNN. The headline is "Prophecy, Not Politics May Also Help Shape America's Clash with Iran." Now, I get that they're sort of intermingling Iran and Palestine. It's just Israel's enemies, you can call it. And this article is very long, so I'm not going to read through all of it. But just to get an idea, a little bit of what it talks about, here's what it says. When most people contemplate the future of America's conflict with Iran, they hunt for clues in grainy satellite photos, statements from military analysts, and President Trump's social media posts. But when scholar Diana Butler Bass considers what could happen next, her thoughts turn toward another group, she says, is now thinking more about prophecy than politics. She recalls warnings from her childhood about the rise of the Antichrist, stories about weeping mothers clutching their empty blankets after their babies were suddenly, quote-unquote, raptured to heaven, and paintings of an angry Jesus leading armies of angels to an Armageddon-like final battle in modern-day Israel. Very specific eschatological imagery painting there. Let me continue here. Those stories terrified and thrilled Bass when she heard them growing up in a white evangelical church in the 1970s. It was a time when the end always seemed near, and books like the bestseller The Late Great Planet Earth warned Christians to gird their loins for a period of great tribulation and prepare for Jesus' triumphant return to Jerusalem. Bass, a prominent progressive religious author, keep that in mind, because this is, I'm starting to see, and this is a pattern that we've noticed here on Canary Cry News Talk the last month or so, maybe a little bit more, couple months. A big divide and conquer op is taking place right now, where progressive Christians, I suppose, are taking on one side of this conversation, maybe complicit with sort of your Al Jazeera type of thing. And then the other side is this pro-Israel group that is under the umbrella of what is called dispensationalism. I know many of you are familiar with that. And there's this war happening. Now, this divide wasn't always this clear. Progressive Christianity was always very attacked by evangelicals in general. But it wasn't in particular with the issue of prophecy or modern nation state Israel. It was more about like, you're woke and you're crazy and, we're more fundamental and they're screaming at each other, throwing rocks. But now it's become more specific and detailed in the issues here. It says Bass, a prominent progressive religious author who hosts a popular Substack, no longer believes those stories, yet when she considers why the U.S. struck 3 nuclear facilities in Iran this month, this was back in June, and what could happen next, she now offers a prophecy of her own. Oh, God, that's what we need. Forget those, prophecies of the Bible or, bad theology or bad eschatology by these crazy evangelical Christians. Why don't we come up with our own prophecy? Okay, this is her own prophecy. Bombing Iran will reinforce Trump's status as God's chosen one and Israel as his chosen nation among many of the president's white evangelical supporters. Not really a prophecy. I mean, it's CNN. Many of these supporters dismiss the dangers of larger war, she tells CNN, because such a clash would mean the world is approaching the end times, a series of cataclysmic events ushering in the second coming of Christ and the rise of Israel as the fulfillment of biblical prophecies. Quote, there's almost a kind of spiritual eagerness for war in the Middle East, says Bass, describing attitudes among some white evangelicals. Quote, they believe a war is going to set off a series of events that will result in Jesus returning. Now, here's where me personally, the nuance, and I go back to Jesus talking about the narrow path. The path is wide to destruction. The path is very narrow to life, because it seems like while everybody's fighting dispensationalism, progressivism, pro-Israel, anti-Israel, Israel is part of end times prophecy, Israel is not end times prophecy, all these different theological arguments taking place that is affecting politics, geopolitics. I'm standing here and I'm looking at it all going, I don't agree with any of this. I don't agree with the hermeneutics of, the dispensational pro-Israel crowd on a personal level. I just don't. I've talked about it before. I don't think 1948 completely fulfilled any prophecy in the Old Testament. I think it may have fulfilled half a verse, something, maybe one verse. But even then, if you think about the Antichrist might present himself as the Jewish Messiah, could this be some kind of counterfeit? Could this be some kind of misdirection? There's a lot there. I don't need to go into it. You guys are all, at least if you're watching this and you're here, you're familiar with a lot of those thoughts. So I don't want you to think that I'm just like defending one group and not defending the other or anything like that. I'm trying to be very nuanced here And I know that's not popular. It is the most unpopular thing you can do today in the clickbait TikTok. You got 1 minute to explain your ideas world that we're living in. But I'm really trying to sit in that nuance because it really is difficult. Because here's the thing. In a broader scope, I am going to defend the believers who believe all this, end time stuff is relevant to current geopolitical Israel and all the stuff going on. Even if I disagree with their eschatology, I will, in the cultural realm, defend the Christian and say, look, these guys they're not, well, I shouldn't say they're not asking for war, as this Bass lady said, because I've been in conversations, discussions around a table of people that believe, that modern nation state Israel is a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. And I've heard the words nuke Iran, level the country. Those types of words have come out of their mouths. So I can't say that they're not for war. So, but I will defend the Christian against sort of this idea that, just because you believe prophecy, therefore, you're a crazy evangelical fundamentalist Christian who wants war and who wants everybody dead, because it's not true. There's a lot more to it than that. But again, however, I will not defend necessarily when it gets down to the nitty gritty of their eschatology when it comes to the folks who support Israel in that way, or modern nation state Israel in that way. I will push back against the progressive Christians who are aligning with the CNNs here and, possibly the Al Jazeera's and the pro-Iran group, because, of course, they're coming at it from they are also coming at this from a religious standpoint. It's just not super obvious, at least in the West, but it is. It's the clash of the monotheistic religions, right? So, okay. Let me see. What else did they say or mention in this long CNN article? And they go bashing Trump for a little while, which is not unexpected here. Oh, here we go. And this is this thing will just it won't die. Some cite a scripture from Genesis 12:3, which recounts God saying, "I will bless those who bless you, and him who honors or dishonors you I will curse." That passage depicts God addressing Abraham, a Jewish patriarch and father of all nations. But some white evangelicals say that passage also refers to Israel both then and now. And then it mentions Ted Cruz and Ted Cruz's clash with Tucker Carlson. I believe it was last week or maybe the week before, where, Tucker said, or not Tucker, Ted Cruz came out and said, "I support Israel because it says in the Bible to support Israel." And then Tucker Carlson said, "Well, where's that? Where's that in the Bible? You don't even know where it's in the Bible." And, there was that whole exchange that happened. And and then they mentioned John Hagee, his influence with the presidency and all this kind of stuff. And they go on for a little bit here and talk about the situation. But, here we go. Here's the part that I wanted to dig into. I'm sorry I'm not scrolling on the actual screen here right now because these have a paywall. And I am unable to actually show the words on the screen. I have to use the text only thing, and now it's really not being nice to me. It's not showing me the headline anymore. Okay, well, whatever. Okay, so this is what it says in later down in the article here on CNN. Tisby and other religious scholars say America's bombing of Iran is also influenced by another source, a form of Christianity pioneered in the 19th century of John Nelson Darby, an Anglo-Irish pastor. Darby looked at certain passages in the Bible's Book of Revelations. Ugh! Pet peeve. Book of Revelation, singular, not Revelations, CNN, and devised the concept of dispensationalism. It divides history into distinct dispensations or periods through which God interacts with humanity differently. Many adherents to this tradition believe in a fiery apocalypse and a rapture, a moment when Christians are suddenly lifted to heaven before a period of tribulation on earth. Darby's views were amplified a century later with Left Behind and yada, 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 the rapture theology. And they actually go on to say that the word rapture is not in the Bible, so these people are bad and they don't know what they're talking about because rapture is not in the Bible. Well, the word Trinity is not in the Bible either. The word rapture comes from harpazo, the Latin treatment of the word harpazo, or getting caught up in 1 Thessalonians 5. The Latin take on it is rapturo or rapturas, and then the word rapture in English. So, this argument about that is ridiculous. However, I also saw some people responding to this CNN article. These were dispensationalists, and they were making arguments about how, pushing back on the CNN article, saying, well, they don't understand the history. It's been thoroughly debunked. The earliest church fathers were all dispensationalists. And as far as my research is concerned, and take that with a grain of salt too. I mean, we're all just trying to figure things out here. But that's not entirely true either. At least, it has to be the application of the early church fathers thing, supporting dispensationalism, is a stretch. You have to kind of compile together what they said, and then add a certain quotes and certain treatise of certain passages. And because they were a little bit more literal than perhaps when Augustine came around and turned everything into allegory, because some of these early church fathers were a little bit more literal in some of their interpretations of scripture, they are labeled, oh, they were the earliest dispensationalists, which may not be the case. And that's another whole discussion to have. What's literal? Like, what do you mean literal? I'm in a Bible study right now where the facilitator of the Bible study says that he's a literal guy. He takes everything literal, and at least on this channel, I've always said, and I think I got this from, maybe it was Michael Heiser, maybe it was somebody else. Maybe it was Chuck Missler that said this. I forget who it was who said it, but they said that you got to take scripture literarily, meaning literal, but in the context of the literature. When I think the example I used, maybe I can pull it up and look it up in the scriptures here. Let me see. Let's see. I'm trying to find a passage where God's hand is mentioned. That's the one I always used to use as an example. I don't know. Oh, here we go. 1 Peter 5, verse 6. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you. Okay. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God. If you're a pure literalist, you're going to be looking for a big hand. Like, where's God's hand? Where is it? I want to humble myself under God's hand. Where are his fingers? Where's his thumb? Right? So this is clearly this is clearly a literary way to describe God's provenance and his authority over you and the world. It's not talking about his literal physical hand. And so, if you're going to say, I take everything literally, I think you're being dishonest and I'm not saying that the Bible, the facilitator of my Bible study is being dishonest. I'm saying you got to think a little bit more deeper about these things, because the arguments about, oh, it's literal, it's not. Well, there's a lot more nuance to it than that. So anyway, this is part of the conversations here within the church, and the idea of dispensationalism in its modern form, post 19th century John Nelson Darby. It is a bit of a problem. I see it as a bit of a problem, and not just because it's faulty sort of theology or hermeneutics, but especially because we're starting to see now, and the evidence is quite clear, that the people that believe the sort of John Nelson Darby dispensationalist view, they have been the biggest geopolitical supporters of modern nation state Israel. And that, to me, was the trap. It's one thing to debate the actual eschatology and disagree on it. Fine, whatever. We're always going to have disagreements and debates within the church. That's normal. I think it's healthy. Iron sharpens iron. Where it, I think, becomes a problem is when the hermeneutic is used as a device for political justification or action or whatever. And that's where I feel a lot of believers have been led astray in this, where they think that they're supporting something that God clearly stated in the Bible, but it's really not that clear, in my opinion. Now, you can support modern nation state Israel. We should be praying for the people of Israel to turn to Christ. That's always been my stance. It's like, hey, we should be praying for them. If we have to support sending guns and money to a small nation and all of our corporations and all of our technical prowess, and you support that, then I don't know. And here's the thing. Here's the rub, right? Because our first, or not the first, but the article before this was the list of tech companies, the plethora of big tech companies that are assisting Israel in this process. So if you are somebody, or if you know somebody who has talked against big tech, the technocracy, they're talk not against it, but like exposing this idea of like, hey, Google, Palantir, all these groups, they're overreaching. It's kind of like this crazy technocratic totalitarian system that's being built up here. If they're critiquing it, and yet they are politically supporting modern nation state Israel for a geopolitical mission, you're caught in a bind, because you are spiritually or religiously aligned with the modern nation state of Israel for their activities. But the very corporations that you might be critiquing as being a problem are the ones assisting Israel in their endeavors. So you kind of see how there is a two-pronged approach here, and I feel that this was the trap, and it is the trap now, where people are going to start doubling down on dispensationalism and all this kind of stuff, and I just don't like where all that's headed, because people are going to set aside the Bible and continued growth and learning and studying the Word in exchange for a geopolitical justification in the moment, a contemporary geopolitical justification. And, I think there are, if I look deep enough, I'm sure there are plenty of examples throughout history where this happens, where, a certain belief system is hijacked and used as propaganda for a political activity or action. And it all comes together, in a sense, with this article from The Nation. And this one's titled, "The Billionaires Are Abandoning Humanity. Peter Thiel and his friends feel they no longer belong to our species." And it's another long article here. It talks about, obviously, Peter Thiel, co-founder of PayPal, his push for populism, and he even talks about Peter Thiel has been very fascinating, and I need to do more on him, and especially I think for the Face Like the Sun channel, I think I might do a little bit more of a deep dive, because he, for the last few years, has been very public about his belief in end times Bible prophecy. Yes, Peter Thiel, the guy, I mean, he is responsible for this Trump presidency. I think we can even say that he's instrumental in the 47th president here, because of his influence with J.D. Vance and just the overall techno-populist movement that we've had here. So he's become a target of the left, which should not be a surprise, really, if you're going to go against it. But you can tell this right-left paradigm is shifting to this new type of divide and conquer. And let me find this one part here. Okay, so it says here, more recently, the environmental movement has taken hold, which blocks progress even more. Thiel refers to climate change activist Greta Thunberg as the Antichrist. He is not being metaphorical in this description. He makes clear that he believes the biblical account of the Antichrist is to be taken as a literal depiction of the dangers facing humanity. Thiel says that, quote, in the 17th century, I can imagine a Dr. Strangelove, Edward Teller type person taking over the world. In our world, it's far more likely to be Greta Thunberg. Okay. So, the nation might be a little bit, I don't know, they're being very loosey-goosey with the word literal. He literally depicted Greta as an antichrist. Oh, not really. And here's what I've noticed what I'm doing now. Because, and this is, I think I tweeted this out saying the fifth generation warfare, it's a very tiresome thing. Because you're sitting here and you go, okay, for this particular claim by the nation, even quoted Peter Thiel, thank you for quoting him, instead of just saying it without any quotes or citation. You know, to say that Peter Thiel is literally calling Greta Thunberg the biblical antichrist, that's pretty hyperbolic. That's not precisely what Peter Thiel said, right? So, look, I'm not going to push back on the nation. It's like, settle down, nation. That's not what Peter Thiel said. But I'm not here to be Mr. Peter Thiel, man. I'm not putting a Peter Thiel shirt on saying, hey, Peter Thiel's a man. We're going to, support Peter Thiel till the end. No, that's not it either. So you can see how the nuance matters so much now, where the divide and conquer is becoming so powerful, where it's like, boom, you got this side, boom, you got that side. It's hard to stay nuanced because you can provide an argument to defend one side or the other based on straw man arguments or bad arguments or misdirection or red herring or whatever types of bad arguments are being presented. You can tear that argument down to show that, like, hey, that's not a very good argument. But then it doesn't mean that you are therefore in 100% support of the person that you are, the opposition to the people that you tore down. It's very complicated, folks. It's very confusing. Let me continue here. There's another part that I wanted to get to in this article. Okay, so Thiel. So now, okay, here's the other part that's strange. So the left and the progressives and all this, they are pushing back on the Thiel brand of Christianity, which Thiel, I don't think he's like a pre-trib guy per se. I don't think he's ever really talked about pre-trib. He talks about the Antichrist and end times stuff, not as, hey, this is under God's sovereignty and we're headed towards something like that. And of course, on this channel, I've talked about the cyclical nature of some of that stuff, that there's nothing new under the sun. So we tend to repeat certain patterns of behavior as a society. And, that just keeps happening. Ultimately, there will be a one-to-one fulfillment of these prophecies, I believe, as God outlined it. But you have Thiel here, also a technocrat pushing transhumanism. He uses end times prophecy not as a warning, or no, he does use it as a warning, but he uses it in a way that benefits his own mission. He's justifying his own mission as a billionaire tech guru guy to further his own desire for conquest or whatever it may be. So it's not, the Antichrist might be. So the watchman. So for example, this is the only way I can really paint the picture. If you're a watchman, right, in the Old Testament times, you're in a watchtower, you see the enemy coming, right? Your job as the watchman is to warn the people below. Okay, Ezekiel 33 talks about it. You can read through it. If you see danger coming and you warn the people, and the people don't listen, well, it's on them. The blood that gets shed is on them because they didn't listen. They didn't heed to the warning. If you see danger coming and you don't say anything and something happens to those people, then the blood's on your head. What Peter Thiel is doing is sees the enemy coming, right, over the horizon, and he's going, we don't want them to take me out, take these people out. Let me bust out the cannon. Let me get the laser gun out and shoot them all down. And so he's sort of inserting himself into the story. And ironically enough, his behavior reflects that of the Antichrist a lot more than Greta Thunberg, Mr. Thiel. So he's a fascinating character. But it says here, Thiel goes on to talk about his hopes that technology will allow humanity to solve the problem of death and achieve long-held promises of Christianity, of eternal life and transcendence. Do you see how all this is kind of coming together? I don't know why that sounded kind of weird here. Hold on, let me see. A little jingle board has a little connection issue sometimes, but I have new gear coming, by the way, folks. So I'll be done with this old computer from 2013 that I used to run some of this stuff. But you see where this is all kind of coming to a head. It's Christianity bad. Those rapture people bad. You know, they support Israel. They're bad. And all those people are saying, oh, if you're pro-Palestine, you're liberal, progressive, you're lefty, Democrat, you're bad. And then there's this other angle where it's like, oh, Peter Thiel, the guy behind Palantir, big tech, PayPal, the whole deal, which means he's spiritually, at the very least, and perhaps even more financially, responsible for a lot of those corporations helping out the modern nation state Israel. Same guy who's saying technology is going to help us, or at least, you know, being framed by the nation as the guy who's going to fulfill the Christian promise of eternal life. Peter Thiel is going to be the guy with technology. They're going to achieve the long-held promise of Christianity of eternal life and transcendence. You see what's happening. Again, I don't fault the nation for this. And again, the confusing nuances here. That prior argument, I'm pushing back against the nation, where it's like, okay, it's a bad use of Peter Thiel's quote to suggest that he was literal about what he said there. But then also the nation, good job at the very least in outlining or maybe listing some of the issues with a guy like Peter Thiel and his influence in our current techno-populist uprising. So, man, it used to be so easy, folks. You know, like, you think back even just 20 years, when 9/11 happened, I was 18 years old. And it was what we were fed as to who was responsible for it and everything else. What we were fed was, oh, it's Al-Qaeda, it's the Islamic radicals. That's what we were fed. And it was very simple. It was a moment of galvanization for the country. I think the social engineers saw that. They're like, hey, this event really brought people in America together, right? But it was very simple. It's like, oh yeah, America, Islamic terrorists. America over here, Islamic terrorists over there. That's what we were fed. Of course, since then, we've come to learn a lot more about what it all means. You know, when the phrase 9/11 was an inside job became popularized, a lot of people thought, oh, it was the U.S. government. You mean the people in the U.S. government pulled this off, right? And now, 20-something years later, there's more evidence to suggest that other people were involved too, the Mossad and, you know, certain other groups. So it's more complicated now. It's not so simple as to say these guys, those guys. You know, World War II, easy. America, West, Constitution, Bill of Rights, let's go. Red, white, and blue. Communists over there, demon possessed. All those guys are demon possessed. Gotta defeat communism. Sorry, I'm getting a message from the wife here. Just want to make sure things are okay. Okay, so yeah. So again, it used to be so simple. And now, because of all these nuances and tips and turns and all these different angles and news outlets and alt media, and part of all the problem, not the problem, but the diagnosis here is alt media coming into the picture as well. Because prior to that, it was mainstream media and everybody else, with independent media being a non-official, unorganized group of individuals just trying to seek the truth. But now with alt media, you have this middleman who is part independent reporters, part a derivative of the establishment media, and then you have this huge conglomerate of debates and problems and angles and views. And if you actually, especially for the Face Like the Sun people hanging out here, if you go to my X account, let me try to pull it up here. I like to promote this because it is actually the only article that I've written on X, I believe. If you go to my page on X, there is a tab for articles. If you hit articles, I wrote one article. It's called Alt Media Chaos, Decentralizing Intelligence Ops and the Watchmen Generation. And I outline basically how the intelligence methodology, it used to be espionage or like secret spies or, that kind of thing. But now, because that doesn't work as much because of the internet and influencers and this influencer culture that we live in, people in the CIA or intelligence individuals are now retiring. I'm putting up air quotes, retiring and coming out of the CIA, and they have platforms to promote their thing. And there's a lot of them that are, we've talked about Sean Ryan. Dude looks and sounds like a great guy. I have never met him. I don't know much about him. All I know is he openly says in his bio that he has connections to the CIA, and he's the guy that said he had the letter from the manifesto from the guy who blew up in the Tesla, the Cybertruck several months ago in front of Trump Tower. And oh, by the way, he was the guy who said that letter had something to do with the UFO stuff, right? So, it's just, and Sean Ryan is huge, right? He's several million followers, interviewing very important people, and so you have these ex-CIA people who are now public, who are pushing conservatism, pushing Christianity, and it's just different now. It's just different now. And so I believe that we have really decentralized the intelligence operation, and now it's hard to tell whether somebody is just being a covert agent, like, oh, I'm just a normal guy, no, I don't have any ties to the government. I'm not forwarding any of this information to the government. Or somebody who's like, yeah, I was in the CIA, but that's my past. I'm here to help you, live a better life from with all the things I learned from the CIA. There's a guy named Andre Bustamante. He's called the Everyday Spy. I talked about him on Canary Cry News Talk quite a bit, but he's an individual who his whole platform is, hey, I'm ex-CIA. I'm going to teach you all the benefits you can get as a CIA agent without killing your family or, compromising your family or killing people. It's like, all right, great, good stuff. And he sends out a newsletter every day and stuff. So all these people, the playing field is really leveled. And that means even the intelligence operatives have to look and sound like your everyday average Joe influencer. And it's a complicated landscape now, 5th generation warfare. It's a whole new ball game. So anyway, back to this Thiel thing. I hope you see the mess, the absolute mess of this situation that we're in now, with many different beliefs. You really have to be a well-rounded, well-read individual to step back and not get caught up in the arguments or debate. And look, we all do it. I do it. I get caught up in something that goes on, or some, news item or development in the Middle East or Israel or something like that. A lot has changed. I talked a little bit in the last live stream on Face Like the Sun, I think a couple weeks ago, which was the first one since the suspension. I talked a little bit about the situation with Candace Owens and how she was part of Daily Wire. And about 2 years ago, I started talking about the separation of Judeo-Christian values, that phrase, Judeo-Christian values that undergirds America. Well, I think they're going to use that to divide the country even more, where they're going to split the Judeo and the Christian. And, I said that like 6 or 7 months before Candace Owens left Daily Wire, became her own thing. And by the way, she's I think she's Catholic, and there's pictures of her with like some people I don't know if it was at the Vatican, but anyway, so it's all operations all the way down. And part of my argument for what I was saying in my article about this was that, in fact, because everybody is being turned into an agent of something or someone, that means even you and I, if we're on the internet, we are effectively agents of something. And I don't mean that in like the negative Agent Smith type of way. I mean it as like, if you have a message, if you have a platform, anyone can get platformed on the internet. You can get up here, you can, whatever your mission is, whatever your message is, you can get it out there. It's the internet age. But because of that lowering of the fence when it comes to being platformed, it becomes very vital as to what you're promoting and how you're being financed. Those are the two things that I highlighted in the article as to how you can analyze who you might want to follow or support when it comes to, media moving forward. Because I've been a guy just screaming into a microphone on the internet for, I don't know, 14 years now, 15 years. And I've never gotten a call from the CIA or a conversation. I've had people that I've met, church goers, like people that in my church that work for the FBI or something like that. And I've never met anybody in the CIA actually, or at least knowingly. I don't think I have met anybody in the CIA or had a conversation with somebody, particularly regarding like important stuff, right? Like maybe I ran into him or, had a shoulder rub at a coffee thing or something, but nothing official. Even the FBI guy that I talked to was like, yeah, I just have to do a lot of paperwork. It's really boring. It's a boring job. And this particular individual, his job was not, out in the field taking down. It was more so, pushing pen to paper type of job. So, back to this conversation here. Everybody has a message. Every chat people, everything you are putting out there, just consider it. It is a message. You are actually saying something. You're actually delivering a sentiment. And so what is that message? Well, for me and Canary Cry, and I know a lot of you agree, or maybe some of you disagree, the message has always been that there's good news, that God became human flesh. He came to earth because he loved us, because he loved his creation, and because he loved us, sacrificed his son, right? And rose again, defeating the very issue with this world, which is decay, death. Defeated death and offered this same eternal life to anyone who believes, who repents and believes. That's it. That's my message, right? And my duty is to love God, love other people, and that means to tell everybody, just whether they're enemies or they're friends, of the good news. And is it easy? No. Is it done with words and papers and videos alone? No. I think how we live has a lot to do with the testimony of the gospel. So, but that's really, my message has been very straightforward in that regard. Financially, there was a small period of time when the Face Like This on YouTube channel was monetized. And I did okay during those maybe like a year or so where I had it. And then the crunch started, right? 2016-ish. Like all the advertisers were like, nah, I can't advertise on this channel. And a lot of that went way down to nothing. Now I can't monetize this channel, or at least the Face Like the Sun channel whatsoever. And we've been operating on value for value, which means no governments, no corporations, no institutions, no affiliate codes, no advertisements, none of it. None of it. If we have gotten some kind of dirty money, somewhere along the way, it wasn't from the institutions writing a check to us. It would have been, and I'm not saying we have, I have no idea. It would have been through individuals who may work at some corporate office of the CIA or something, and that individual choosing to support us financially, right? So, I mean, anyway, point being that we chose to operate this way with value for value because We saw the problem with advertising. We've and when I say we, I mean like me and Basil, but of course, myself on this channel, I saw the issues of relying on AdSense or something for your income. It fluctuates. It's an imperfect science. You can say one wrong thing and boom, you don't get a check. And you only hear about that stuff with the big influencers that will dedicate a whole episode or even sue YouTube to get their point across, but they have the resources to do that. We may never get that big. I don't necessarily want to get that big. I don't want millions and millions of followers and be this voice, and that's not my desire at all. But clearly, if you're a guy like Sean Ryan, you can pop out, start podcasting. I think he started podcasting in like, I think we looked it up at one time. Maybe it was like 2019. I think it was right before the pandemic. But anyway, he explodes. He's huge. Millions of followers, millions, billions maybe of views on various platforms. So anyway, what am I ranting about all this stuff for? I don't even remember. I don't remember why I was talking about this anymore. I guess it was just the point of you have a responsibility. If you are using the internet, if you're using social media, even if you're just replying or whatever it is, there is a level of responsibility. And look, I'm not saying every single thing. If you're making a joke, if you're like our good friend here, Sir Darren, Night of the Hungry Panda, is trying to trigger me by posting a tweet that says revelations over and over again. Like, hey, that's fine. That's just all in fun and games. But I'm talking about in general, like if you're publishing articles, if you're publishing content online, really be considerate about what you're saying and what the message is, truly. And then in terms of analyzing who to support, that's it. Analyze the message. Like, what is the core message, right? And then you can, if you can, look at how they're financially supported, because that it doesn't mean you can't support a podcast that does advertising or something, but you'll just understand that, like, oh, okay, there are people that support this individual or this group or this podcast or whatever, and they're not associated with any government institution or three-letter agency or anything like that. So these things will become more important as we move forward here. And it's hard to do, especially with the advent of alt media, because it's blurred the lines so much. There's this huge gray area where you're not sure if it's like establishment type stuff or if it's independent. But we have, I think, even in the article that I showed you here, it's become very clear the distinctions between independent media, alternative media, and mainstream media. And there's a symbiosis with all three, really. Keeping things accountable. It's almost like the three prongs of government. Now that I think about it, I just kind of realized it now, but you got the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the, oh my gosh, judicial, executive, and, what's the third branch? Oh my gosh, I had absolute brain fart. Embarrassing. Okay, well, you get my point. You get my point. Wow, that was an embarrassing moment there. Anyway, the idea being that the three prongs of government keep each legislative, thank you, Christina, talking for how long now? Sometimes when you talk for too long, your brain just stops working. Hour and 40 minutes. Okay, hour and 40 minutes of talking. Might lose a little track of what I'm saying here. But yeah, legislative, executive, and judicial branch. And the idea is to keep the government accountable by having three different prongs, right? So similarly, maybe independent media, alt media, and mainstream media is somewhat in that way, but I suppose maybe not, because, you got your mainstream media, which is absolutely corrupt. You have your alt media, which is not entirely corrupt, but more corrupt than you'd imagine. Oh, thank you, everybody, for letting me know about the legislative. Maybe I fell asleep during fifth grade when we were learning that stuff. Okay, so yeah, I think my point is clear here, and I hope you see basically what we're dealing with when it comes to this whole issue, especially with the Israel conversation. It's just a big pile of confusion, really. And despite it, the gospel message is so clear and simple. You know, we don't need Peter Thiel to figure out some transhumanist future for us to live. And why would you even want to live in this fallen state? You know, that to me is what's always been a little confusing. It's like, wait, we are clearly falling short of even our own standards. You know, as individuals, nobody is perfect. How do we even have this concept of perfection? It goes back to the argument for the existence of God from ontological perspectives. It suggests that the true problem here is what the Bible lays out, the sin problem, the human heart issue. And that's really at the core of it. And solving that aspect of it, a spiritual thing, but then, you know, bleeds into the physical, that's more important than anything else. Because, you know, truly, if people's hearts were healed and they repent and they turn to Christ and their works begin to reflect that, then we wouldn't have so many of the issues, right? But a lot of times, a lot of problems that have spiraled into world issues, genocides, wars, all this stuff, it comes from a place of pride. It's from, you know, because these are not, you know, one could even argue natural people. There's a debate within, you know, philosophy of like, you know, does evil exist or why does evil exist? You know, and they'll call things like a tsunami that took out a human being as like a naturally caused tsunami, right? Because we can always speculate on whether any natural disaster is actually natural anymore. But in the general sense, like, hey, somebody slips off a mountain, they fall, they pass away. Why is that? That's evil. Why is, you know, that allowed, kind of thing? But you know, as opposed to an actual calculated evil where, oh, just because of my geopolitical affiliation or wanting to protect my homeland, I don't care. I'm just going to blow up all these innocent people over there because they're in my way, you know? So, all right. I think we got enough ranting from me on these issues. Let me move on. I got a couple other stories that I want to hit here and then we'll call it a day. Let's see. Oh, this one's fun. Let's lighten it up a little bit. Just because, you know, it's been kind of heavy duty so far this episode. It's a Flippy update.
Flippy update.
Do you want fries with that?
I forget the exact whole line, but basically the Flippy update is about Flippy, which is a disembodied robot arm that's taking our jobs, taking our spouses, taking over the world. There's nothing we can do about it. There's something to that line. Anyway, this is coming from NBCnews.com, and everyone's been sharing it the last couple days here. Chinese AI robots compete in first ever soccer match. Here we go. Let's hear this 1-minute report from NBC.
With fans in the stands, a first for the sports world. China is calling this the first 3-on-3 humanoid robot soccer match. But Messi and Ronaldo don't have much to worry about. These athletes seem to putt around, excel in face plants, and headbutting one another. Some even had to be carried off the pitch. But it's not the athletic play that is world class, it's the technology. China claims all these robots are AI-driven without human intervention, programmed to do push-ups, walk uphill, and withstand a straight shot to the chest. Even designed to stand up after falling, equipped with sensors to help find the ball and navigate the field. Sort of. College teams reportedly built the robots, with one taking home a trophy after scoring the most goals. The World Cup? It's not. But for one Chinese college, glory in the Robo Cup.
Okay. All right. So there you go. You got robots playing soccer. Which, of course, the robots are going to play soccer. Sports. the sociology of sports, I think, is very important because a lot of culture is facilitated with sports as a platform. Uh, when I was in college at UC Irvine studying sociology, we had, everything is based, it's sociology in the early 2000s. So it was very liberal. And we had to talk about, I had to write a paper on, I think it was called the Proposition 11, Proposition 10. I forget what it was. It was basically about women's rights in sports. And, I remember thinking like, yeah, women can play sports. I don't care if women play sports. But the idea was, but there's more scholarships for men than there are for women. And it was like, well, yes, because usually universities have this thing called football. And football has lots of players, and they're usually men. And so naturally, you will have more scholarships for men than women. And of course, maybe it was called Prop 9 or I forget the name of it. Basically, what happened was Title 9. Maybe it was Title 9. Because of Title 9, they had to have equal amounts of scholarships for men and women. And so, if you have a football team, you got like 60 some odd guys that are all on scholarship. Well, you got to have 60 some odd scholarships for women, like beyond the sports with like co-ed sports or sports that have a men's and women's team. So they had to come up with all these different sports for women that are not real sports really, and like hand out these scholarships. Just a mess. Anyway, point being that sports is a cultural touch point for influence, for shaping a whole society. And so to see these robots fumble around, one's getting carried off in a stretcher. I mean, I wonder if he came back too. That would be the ultimate sports move, right? The old Paul Pierce. I have my own kind of examples of that. Paul Pierce was a player for the Boston Celtics during, I think it was the 2008 NBA Finals. The Lakers are playing Boston Celtics in Boston. I was rooting for the Lakers, and their main guy, one of their main guys, Paul Pierce, got hurt. And he was wheeled off the court in a wheelchair. And all of us Laker fans were like, all right, their main guy's down. We're going to take this game. And then he comes back out kind of with a limp or something. And he proceeds to hit a bunch of 3-pointers and wins the game for Boston. So he became known as this, people were questioning whether how bad was he really hurt if he's being wheeled out, was it for dramatic purposes or whatever. But just it's an example because there's a robot here being carried off in a stretcher, which is hilarious. They couldn't just put him on a golf cart or something. They had to use a stretcher. Anyway. So, the robot takeover recreationally, it's all fun and games until they all turn on humanity. And that's, I suppose, the dystopian outcome that many people fear. But I don't have much more to say about this other than, of course, China's going to have robot soccer, and I can picture us in America. There's going to be a market for people who are not excited about UFC. There's too much blood. There's too much brain damage, maybe even football. It's just too much. So let these robots fight. And we already have robot wars, right? Where they come out with different robots and they battle each other. But having robots play human sports is a whole nother level. And actually, it's a great way to track the progress because this report from NBC was like, Messi and Ronaldo, don't worry, guys. These robots can barely walk across the field. Now, right now in 2025, let's see where these soccer robots are at in like 5 years. And I bet they're going to be people are going to be a little more freaked out when they're, jumping and doing somersaults and twists in the air and kicking the ball 100 miles per hour or something. So anyway, just a little side story because we wanted to inject a little bit of fun in here. Then what everyone's talking about today, just real briefly, because it did break today, and it would be bad for me not to at least mention it, and that is the Diddy story. And actually, I'm going to play the Epstein jingle for this.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
Because, of course, everyone's talking about it because of the situation here. NBC News headline, Sean Diddy Combs found not guilty of racketeering and sex trafficking, but convicted of lesser charges. Okay, what happened here? I think that's the article. Is it this one that outlined all of this? Maybe it wasn't this exact one. Well, the video here is talking about how there was the charges for Diddy. 1 count of racketeering conspiracy, count 2, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, count 3, transportation to engage in prostitution, count 4, sex trafficking by force, fraud, and coercion, count 5, I can't even read count 5. What is count 5? Let's see, move out of the way there. Something about prostitution. Okay, so there was all this stuff, but a lot of it was dropped today. It says here the jury's verdict delivered on the third day of deliberations declared Combs, 55, not guilty of 1 count of racketeering, conspiracy of 2 counts, racketeering conspiracy, and 2 counts of sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, but guilty of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Okay, so the big ones like racketeering conspiracy and counts of sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion dropped. Like, those are the big ones. The ones he's charged for is transportation to engage in prostitution. Which, what does that mean? Is driving to one of those houses? One of those parties or something? Like, okay. The verdict is seen as a win for Combs and his defense team, which did not call a single witness during the 7-week trial. So this is great for Diddy because he's getting off on all the big charges. But of course, what everybody is pointing out is this right here. Combs still faces considerable prison time. At sentencing, the prostitution transportation charges carries as much as 10 years in prison per count. Prosecutor Maureen Comey said the government would seek a maximum of 20 years. And of course, everybody in the alt world is pointing out Maureen Comey because she is the daughter of former FBI Director James Comey. Wouldn't you know? Wouldn't you know it? Does that surprise anybody at this point? Doesn't surprise me. And in fact, I think some people were pointing this fact out as soon as the trial started. Now, Maureen Comey was also the prosecutor in the Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell cases, which is interesting. We have this Business Insider from November of 2021. James Comey's daughter is a lead prosecutor in Ghislaine Maxwell's child sex trafficking case. Here's what we know, yada, yada, yada. And she was even involved in some of the Epstein stuff, the Epstein cases, I mean. So, yeah, a lot of people are not very... I don't know. They don't believe the Diddy thing was legitimate in terms of the conclusion of some of his counts here, or his or what he was being charged for. And so in the article from Business Insider from 4 years ago, it says Comey's only political donations were $233 to Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign in 2015, according to campaign finance transparency site OpenSecrets.org. Her father said in an ABC interview that his wife and daughters marched in the Women's March the day after President Trump's inauguration. This is back in 2016. And that he was pretty sure they all wanted Hillary Clinton to be the first woman president. Okay, so that's her. That's Maureen Comey, who was the prosecutor in the Diddy case. And wouldn't you know it, Diddy gets off on all the really hard, big charges. This world, right? Come on. This world is just, it's just corrupt all the way down, folks. There's no justice, true justice, until God returns. And, you know, as the world gets darker too, doesn't it make a lot of sense that God comes back and just burns everything? You know, the whole thing, the harvests, all that kind of stuff. It makes sense. So we'll keep track of this, see how this develops over time. But, you know, I don't think anybody is surprised who was paying attention to this stuff before. And, you know, at a certain point, all of this, the Diddy stuff, the Epstein trials, the Ghislaine Maxwell stuff in the courts, it's my opinion. I don't have any hard evidence for this. It's just my opinion based on patterns, just looking and trying to recognize patterns. That by the time celebrities and well-known figures are in court and being tried and prosecuted for their activity, their crimes, the actual components of the criminals, or maybe not the components, but the true folks who are really behind the scenes, the operation, maybe you can call it, they number one, they still operate. And number two, they've probably changed tactics already. You know, so by having everybody focus on the court cases and all this stuff, the reason why people do that is because they are seeking some kind of justice, earthly justice with this stuff. And of course, you know, there's something to be said about, you know, true earthly justice in terms of, hey, if you commit a crime, if you do something and you go to jail or you pay a big fine or whatever it is, it is what it is. But when it comes to these big cases that are representations of a much bigger, deeper, uglier problem, which is child trafficking and, you know, sex trafficking and all this type of stuff, the blackmail type of thing that Epstein was doing, it's a much deeper, bigger problem. I go back to the human heart because ultimately that's what's causing all of this, and maybe some influence or whispers from nefarious principalities and powers. But point being that the court stuff is not going to bring justice. It might bring some level of justice for the individuals who were abused, the Jane Doe in the what is it? I almost said Puff Daddy. I'm so old. I remember the Puff Daddy days. No, Diddy. Some of those individuals, I can see, you know, if there's a financial compensation for these folks or some level of justice, sure. You know, I think that's what a lot of the court stuff is for. But in terms of societally and the greater issue at hand when it comes to the trafficking problem and all of that, not going away. It's still out there and it's probably changed form because, you know, a lot of people are up to speed on much of that. So there you go. There's the P Diddy thing. He's not P Diddy either. He's now Diddy. These rappers, man, they got to just stick to one name. Why do they got to keep changing their names? I guess they're rebranding, but still, it's just ridiculous. All right. I have one more story and I am gonna get out of here. This one is about Antarctica.
It's cold, Baza. It's cold. Antarctica, go burn. The snowstorm. Antarctica.
Ice scientists are penguins.
Antarctica, they're opening the abyss.
That's my Alex Jones impression there. Maybe I should do more of that. Okay. Speaking of influencers and the world watching through influencers and all that, CNN World headline, U.S. teen influencer detained in Antarctica while attempting solo flight to 7 continents. Oh no, an influencer has been detained. A teenage pilot who was attempting to fly all 7 continents solo hit a patch of rough air this weekend when Chilean authorities detained him for changing his flight plan without their permission and landing in Antarctica. Chilean prosecutors say American influencer Ethan Guo, 19 years old, broke, quote, multiple national and international regulations by changing his flight plans without prior notice, landing on a part of Antarctica where the South American country maintains a territorial claim. CNN requests a comment from Guo, whose lawyers on Sunday said the young pilot had experienced complications while flying. Guo, whose website states he's trying to raise $1 million for cancer research by becoming, quote, the first person ever to fly to all 7 continents solo, has broadcast his continent-hopping journey since last September to more than 1 million Instagram followers. His last post on June 23rd documents a flight over the Philippines. Chilean authorities say that on Saturday, Guo submitted a false flight plan and took off from Carlos Ibanez del Campo Airport in the southern Chilean city of Punta Arenas as the sole passenger and crew member aboard a Cessna 182Q aircraft registered as N182WT. At one point during the flight, authorities said he turned off course toward Antarctica. There's a picture of the guy here. Quote, the accused provided false information to the Aeronautical Authority. He submitted a flight plan indicating that he was going to fly over the city of Punta Arenas, said Christian Crisosto Rifo, the regional prosecutor of Magallanes and Chilean Antarctica. Quote, however, he continued toward Antarctica without informing anyone and without any authorization, landing at the airfield of Lieutenant Rodolfo Marsh Base in Chilean Antarctic territory. With this behavior, the accused seriously endangered the safety of air traffic in Antarctica and the Magallanes region. Okay. How much air traffic is over Antarctica? Serious question. Like, I know, I'm sure there's air traffic going on, but for a little Cessna, and I get it, you got to follow rules in the airspace. I understand all that, but I don't know. It's just weird to be like, it seriously endangered air traffic safety over Antarctica. It's like, what? You guys got people coming in and out of there all the time. What is going on? You got Hitler's children or some Nephilim penguins walking around. I don't know it's just a weird excuse. Cristoso explained that as soon as Guo landed in Antarctica, he was detained and formally charged. Quote, the accused not only violated the aeronautical code, but also multiple national and international regulations regarding routes to Antarctica and access to the white continent, emphasized Crisosto. On Sunday, his lawyers told reporters, yada, yada. Basically, his lawyer said that, like, hey, he had some issues while he was flying, which is why he had to make the emergency turn and da-da-da-da-da. So there's a 90-day investigation period looking into the case to see if Guo will be charged or released. And once again, in terms of the 5th generational warfare, you have an influencer. You have an influencer in a situation. I mean, compare this to Greta recently. We had Greta get on a raft and tell everybody, I'm going into Gaza. And the pirates might take us, or whatever she said. And then she's near Gaza. The IDF come and pick her up, and the world is watching. Oh no, Greta has been arrested by the Israeli authorities. And then you see the video footage, and they're like handing out sandwiches, and she's laughing and having a good old time. I'm not saying that's what this is, but it's the only comparison I have as to an influencer being detained or getting in trouble and what that might mean. Now, I have never heard of Ethan Guo, 19 years old. He can be my son. I'm old enough to be his father. I would be very disappointed at my son if he did this. I'd be like, son, you failed me. So anyway, this puts this guy on the map. People are going to start paying attention to this guy. Yeah. How dare you? How dare you, Israeli strong man? Kidnap me off my raft boat. Give me my frog hat. Okay, anyway. So I think it's more the same here where you have a young individual influencer. They need some new blood for influencers, right? You got the old influencers are getting old. They're all washed up. Okay, those Instagram influencers from the 2010s, they're done, man. Get out of here. We need some new blood. get some teenagers up in this propaganda machinery. So now we got in Antarctica, right? I don't think he was, or maybe he was. Oh, okay. So I guess part of the story is he was trying to do the 7 continents, flying to 7 continents. So he did that. He used a little trickery to try to do it or to get there. Now he's in trouble. Now the lawyers are saying, they're trying to bail him out or whatever. But with enough public sort of attention to this guy or this behavior, maybe the Chilean government will have to concede and say, all right, okay, and just a little slap on the wrist. And next time, you can't be doing that. You can't be tricking our air traffic people with false information or whatever. So just something to keep track of here. Antarctica has been a very fascinating and interesting topic for us for a long time. Obviously, there's probably stuff going on there. A few weeks ago, we had the strange, particles or something that were detected from under the ice. I think some of the JFK papers pretty much validated that Hitler may have run away and hung out in, it wasn't Antarctica, it was it Argentina. And that's relevant because South America, Argentina, all those nations in South America have some kind of territorial claim to Antarctica because it's sort of they're the gateway to Antarctica. So, and it would make sense. Maybe Hitler went to Argentina because he had quicker access to Antarctica where he left his lightsaber or something, So, all right. That's pretty much all I have for today's episode. Been going for a little over 2 hours here. Hope you guys get something out of this. Yeah, Project Paperclip, of course, Simple Cody, and Rami, Operation Paperclip, of course. Yeah, and I implore everybody to look at all that history and to continue studying those things because they're very interesting, but apply it to how things might be playing out today because I don't think the tactics are different, but maybe the names and labels are different. And so it's a good exercise to keep you sharp, and not fall into the arguments that are at hand, culturally speaking. I don't have access to the producer list today for Canary Cry News Talk episode 855. We will get to that next episode. Hopefully Basil has power. I wonder if Basil was able to send out an email. I just actually have not heard from him at all for the last 4 hours. So hope he's doing okay. Pray for him. Thank you everybody for hanging out today. I appreciate all of you. I thank you to the artists. Thank you to the producers coming in with your time. Truly is. Yeah, the survey. Yeah, let me double check because I did create the link for the survey, but I don't know if that survey actually exists. And for those of you who don't know, we've been conducting no, it's still the last. I think it's still the last episode's survey. We've been trying to get surveys after every episode to get an idea of how we can improve the show and what do you guys like about the podcast? What do you not like about the podcast? And today was somewhat experimental because I decided to go ahead and stream the podcast on the Face Like the Sun channel. And I know a lot of maybe some older viewers of Face Like the Sun, they weren't always fond of Basil. so I thought maybe today might be a good day to do it because he's not here today, and not because I'm trying to get rid of him or anything like that. It's just I know people get triggered when they see Basil and his googly eyes. It is a little bit goofy, but hey, to his credit, he's maintained his anonymity for all this time here. We've been podcasting since 2012, Canary Cry Radio, so that's 13 years. He's maintained his anonymity on the internet for 13 years, which is pretty impressive. So got to give him a little bit of credit there. Wow, I can't find this stream on YouTube. Let's see. Let me try to find it this way. Trying to see if I can pull it up. Wow, YouTube still does not like me. Like, even though I got my channel back, it's so hard to find stuff. 100 people watching on the Face Like the Sun channel. That's it, huh? 100. All right. That's cool. Thank you for the 100 that are there. Appreciate you. What's the ratio on that? That is 0.03% of the subscribers are here live with us today. 260,000 subs. Only the 100 of you who are there on the Face Like the Sun channel, you are special folks. I appreciate you. Thank you for that. You can also always find this podcast on the Canary Cry News Talk YouTube channel as well as Rumble and your RSS feed. And yeah, so there you go. Thank you to everybody who stuck it out. We will be back next Monday, I believe. Have a great 4th of July. There's already a firework building that blew up today. So just be careful. Someone's always losing fingers or dying or something during 4th of July. So just be careful out there. I will publish a Beyond the Verse. It's scheduled for Saturday. I may just publish it tomorrow. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. I'm trying my best to publish things on the Face Like the Sun channel again. So that's in order as well. Also, a couple things that just for my own selfish reasons here, just prayer requests on my end. My father is battling lung cancer, so he is going through his chemo treatments, and so just continued prayers for that. He's 73 years old now, so it's getting up there in age, but still too young to pass from lung cancer. So we're keeping I'm praying for him, and I've been trying to help him out as much as possible. And it's hard to do with kids and, full-time job here doing content and stuff like that. But that's one thing. The other thing is to pray for our situation with the Masters Institute. Again, I mentioned it earlier in the show, but it's just we always run into mysticism and occult stuff. And yeah, it was not a good situation. I'll talk about that. Maybe I'll make a whole nother video on it at some point, but just pray for me on that. And then the other thing is that, and I know the pastor might be listening, so just a heads up if you're listening, pastor. I've been offered, if I want to, an opportunity to be a worship leader at a church locally here where I'm at in San Diego. Not a big church, it's a pretty small church. But it would be pretty time consuming on top of everything else I'm doing. So I'm trying to be prayerful about it. But if you would pray for me on behalf, I'm not the greatest musician or anything like that, but I love playing music, and I've learned to appreciate worship as a biblical practice. And I used to think that you can't be too technical with Christian music because it's Christian music and it's got to, but I'm starting to realize, okay, there's a difference between Christian music and praise and worship, and Bible talks about play skillfully. So, if you're going to play skillfully, you got to practice a lot. But anyway, there's an opportunity there. I'm already volunteering. I have been volunteering in that capacity for a little while. But there's a loose offer that was extended in that direction. So it's something that I'm considering. So if you guys will pray for me on that, that'd be great. And if you guys have any prayers, do message us, email us. We're constantly praying for people, or we're calling upon the producers, which I will do right now.
Producers, assemble!
It's another way to help produce the show. If you can't do it with your time, talent, or treasure, you can pray for us, or you can pray for other people who are listeners, a part of this community. It's a great thing that we have here that is different, differentiates us from many different podcasts doing what we do when it comes to deconstructing news or deconstructing world events. Even coming at it from a biblical perspective, that we have a unique take on all this stuff. So your prayers are always appreciated. And thank you for that. And again, if you have any personal prayers that you'd like us to announce or to, make the call out to our producers, you can message us in multiple ways, and we'll either do it privately. You can tell us if you want it to be private, or we can ask the community to step in and pray for those things. So, all right. It's always amazing to me that I can just ramble on for 2.5 hours without really getting stopped. And then I looked at the length of Basil's solo episode, both of his solo episodes, the last couple Mondays that he's had solo episodes, and he's going 3+ hours. And I was going, man, how's he getting 3 hours in? But you know what I realized? I talk faster than Basil. You know, my speech is like, it's just I talk faster. Basil's more, he's very articulate about what he is saying, and then he will stop and pause and let air breathe, the silence for a moment before he picks up on his ideas and talks and delivers. And so my 2.5 hours is probably equivalent to Basil's 3 hours. So there you go, folks. We're all time travelers here. Okay. Time to wrap it up. We appreciate people that stick around and hang out and stuff, and we'd like to know how you guys do or don't share the show. I wish we did have a survey today, because I really am curious. You know, if you do share the show, maybe Basil's asked these questions in the survey already, but do you share the show or the YouTube channel or whatever it is with other people? And if you do, why do you do it? Is it topical? Is it a general thing? Or if you don't, I'm more curious about people who don't. Why not? Is it because you don't want to be judged? You don't want to be thinking you're weird or whatever? So I'm curious about that. So if that's something you want to answer or give us feedback on, you can do that. But we call it rattling cages here at the Canariums. And all you got to do is walk right up to people, grab them by the cage, and shake it.
The end of the world occurred pretty much as we had predicted.
I want to shake things up, stir up some controversy, rattle a few cages. Hey, stop that! You'll never silence me. I'm the last angry man, a crusader for the little guy. Leave the bird alone. Never. Rattle a few cages. Rattle a few cages.
The human race will have every opportunity to improve.
And if they don't?
Ask Noah.
All right. Happy 4th of July. Happy America Day coming up. What else we got? 1967, FOIA goes into effect. 1994, Jeff Bezos incorporates Amazon. And then Sunday, 2022. Sunday is the 3-year anniversary of the Georgia Guidestones being demolished. Wow, that's wild. And then next Monday, when we will be back, it'll be Tell the Truth Day. So we shall be telling the truth on that day. God bless everybody. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. Have a great weekend. We'll see you all next time. God bless, and think outside the cage.
This is not about freedom or personal choice.
I will keep you warm and safe in my people zoo.
It will kill.
We will hunt you down and make you pay. Give me a break.
Remember, reality is an illusion. The universe is a hologram. Buy gold. Buy!
None is righteous. No, not one. No one understands. No one seeks for God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. No one does good, not even one. Their throat is an open grave. They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of asps is under their lips. Their mouth is full of curses and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. In their paths are ruin and misery, and the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Now we know that whatever the law says, it speaks to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be stopped, and the whole world may be held accountable to God. For by works of the law, no human being will be justified in his sight, since through the law comes knowledge of sin, the righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ, for all who believe. For there is no distinction, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and are justified by his grace as a gift, through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus.
shall deal bountifully with me.
Value for value. We take no money from corporations, commies, or cartels.